Welcome back to Bible class, boys and girls. I'm so glad you came back. This is such a fun way to get to learn about God. Last week we talked about our superhero David. This week we're learning about our superhero named Esther. She was a real queen in the Bible, and there is a whole book in the Bible that has the name of Esther on it, and I'm going to show you that. So I went back to my mother's house today, and she was reading this book called right there, Esther. She was reading all about the facts in the Bible so she could tell our story today. When a royal family has a wedding, that's a very big deal. And last summer, we got to see Prince Harry, Mary, Meghan, and they got to have a wedding in the royal family. The same thing happened to Esther. She got married to the king, and that made her a queen. And that was a very, very special day. She was chosen by God to save her people, and that's what our story is going to be about today. We hear about a scepter in the story. We get to hear about a king and all the things that the king ate. And my mama's going to tell that story to you. So I hope you stay tuned.
Hi, Tati.
Just sit right back and you'll hear the tale of a fateful day that started with a mean old man, bad in every way. When Mordecai wouldn't bow to him, he made an evil plea. He went to the king and he asked for him to sign a decree, The people started getting scared. They had a feeling of dread. If not for the courage of a beautiful queen, the people would be dead. The people would be dead.
Once upon a time, there was a king named Ahasuerus, and that's a hard word to say. But he was king over all of Persia, and he sat on his throne, and he thought, I need to have a big banquet and invite in all the men of my kingdom to see all the beauties of my palace. And so he did. He invited in all the men of the kingdom, and he put on a big banquet full of all kinds of food and wine to drink, and they came to see the king's palace. They didn't stay a day like we do for a party. They stayed 80 days, and it was a big party, and he fed them a lot of food, and they got drunk on the wine, because if too much wine causes bad things. And when all the men were drunk and the king was drunk, he made a bad decision. He said, I'll bring in the queen, Vashti, and show her beauty off to all these men. And so he sent for Vashti, and he said, come down and show your beauty off to all these men. And she was modest, and she didn't care to do that. And she wrote back and she said, no, I won't come. Now the king was angry. He had told her what to do, and she didn't do it. And he said to all the men that had gathered there, what would you do? What should I do about this? And they said, well, if she doesn't obey you, then our wives won't obey us. So you need to get rid of her. Dismiss her from being queen and get you a new queen who will obey you. And the king liked this. So he banished Vashti from the kingdom. And he sent out word, bring in all the beautiful young maidens, and we will have a tryout for a new queen. And that's what they did. They brought in all these beautiful girls. One of the girls that came was named Esther, and she was a Jewish girl. And her uncle, her cousin Mordecai, had raised her. Her mother and daddy died. And so the girl Esther was one who came to try out to be the queen. She was beautiful. And when the king saw all the others, it took about a year for them to prepare to come before the king. And they put a lot of lotion and perfume and myrrh and anointed them, made them beautiful. And so when Esther came in before the king, he had seen all these other beautiful maidens, but he liked Esther the best of all. He loved her, and he said, I choose Esther. She's going to be the queen. And so they put a crown on her head, and she came before the king, to be his new queen. And he loved her.
Oh, that's great.
That's not how a king walks. Baby, you forgot the crown.
One of the men that worked for the king was named Mordecai, and he was a Jew, and he loved God and obeyed God. And he sat at the gate because he helped protect the king. He didn't let bad people come in who would hurt the king or kill him. And one day while he was sitting at the gate, he heard two men plotting to go in and kill the king. And he sent word to Queen Esther, who was his cousin, and he told her about it. And she went to the king and told him, two bad men are planning to kill you. And he found out that was true. She said Mordecai told her. And he had these two men hanged and killed and got rid of them. And he wrote in his book, Mordecai has saved my life. I must do something nice for him. But he didn't do it. He did like a lot of us do. He forgot about it. He put it in his book and put it away and forgot it. Well, there was another man who worked in the kingdom, but he wasn't a good man like Mordecai. He was an evil man, and his name was Haman. And Haman liked to walk through the streets and have everybody bow down before him. And all the people did that because the king had made him a great man of honor in his kingdom. And all the people bowed down in front of him when he went by. But when he walked by the Jew, Mordecai, and expected him to bow down in front of him, Mordecai did not, because he was a Jew, and he knew that God said, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. So Mordecai wasn't going to bow down to any man. Oh, this made Haman so angry. He walked on by, he would ride his horse and go by other people who would bow down. And he thought, what am I going to do to him? I'm so angry with him. I think, who is he? And the people said, he's a Jew. They have a different set of values. They don't bow down to people. And he said, we're going to have them killed. And he got a bad plot to kill all the Jews. And he went to the king and asked permission to have all the Jews killed. Now the king didn't know much about the Jews, and he didn't know his queen was a Jew. And when Haman came in and talked to him about killing these Jews, he made the law. The king signed it and put his ring on it, and that meant it couldn't be undone. So now all the Jews are going to be killed on one day, and that would include Esther, the beautiful queen, and Mordecai, who had saved his life, the Jew. Mordecai hears about all the Jews that are going to be killed. And he's so sad, he puts on sackcloth and ashes, and he weeps and cries, and he says, all my people are going to be killed. And so he sends word to Queen Esther, and he says, Esther, you need to go to the king and ask him to change this wicked law. And she sent word back and she said, I can't go to the king. If I go to the king when he didn't send for me, I'll be killed. I can only go if the king sends for me. And she said, if I go without permission and he raises the golden scepter, I'll live. But if he doesn't, I die. And The cousin Mordecai said, "Don't think you're going to live when all the Jews die. You'll die too. And who knows but you came to the kingdom for just such a time as this. You may have become queen so you could save the Jews." And she thinks about that. Is that true? Did God put her in this position so she could save her people? And she sends word back to Mordecai, and she says, "I will go. And if I perish, I perish." She was very brave. And so she dressed up in her queenly robe with her crown on her head, and she decides she will go in to the king. But she tells all of her people to fast and pray. Pray that she will live and not die. And then she gets her courage up, and she's very courageous. And she goes up to the throne room, and she enters without permission. And she stands there before the king in all of her beauty. And the king looks up and sees her, and he takes the scepter that's in his hand and he raises it high because he wants her to live and not die. And he raises that golden scepter. And he said, "Queen Esther, what can I do for you? Anything, even half my kingdom." And she says a simple request. "I would like for you and Haman to come to my house for a banquet tomorrow night." And he says, "Yes, we'll do that." That's such a simple request. And so he sends for Haman. And he tells him, "I want you to go with me to the queen's house, and we will have a dinner with her." Well, Haman was so happy. He was so happy. He went home and told his wife Zeresh, "Only I and the king get to go to the queen's house for dinner." And then he walked by like he always did, past Mordecai the Jew, and he didn't bow down to him. And he went home and he said, "Oh, everything good happens, but none of it matters because the Jew won't bow down to me." And she said, "Well, go build a big scaffold in the backyard so you can hang Mordecai on it. The day that all the Jews die, you can kill Mordecai." And he was happy with this. So he went with the queen to dinner. And she didn't tell the king what she wanted. He said again, "Esther, what can I do for you?" They ate the banquet, and she said, "I would like for you to come tomorrow night and eat with me again, with Haman." And he said, "Certainly, we will." But that night he was looking through his book, and he saw where Mordecai had saved his life, and he had written in the book that he would like to do something good for Mordecai. And he called in the servants. In fact, he saw Haman there in the palace, and he said, "Haman, what would you do for somebody that you wanted to honor, to show great honor for?" And the Bible tells us that Haman thought, "Who would he want to honor more than me? It must be me he wants to honor." So he said, "Well, I would have him led through the grounds of the palace on a white horse, and put the king's robe on him and a ring on his finger, and have the man that leads him say, 'This is the man the king wants to honor.'" And the king said, "That is good. I like that. I want you to take Mordecai the Jew and put him on the horse, and you lead him through the city and proclaim, 'This is the man the king wants to honor.'" Oh, Mordecai was so wretched. He was so unhappy. He couldn't think of doing this, but he had to do it. So he led the horse through the town and called out, "This is the man the king wants to honor." And Mordecai rode on the horse and followed him through the town, and he had to proclaim his honor for this man all the way through town. Now he went home and told Zeresh, "I am humiliated. Look what I had to do." But he was going to dinner with the king and Esther, so he tried to forget it. He just went to dinner again. And when they were seated at the dinner table, the king said, "Esther, what do you want? I know you want something." And she said, "Oh, my king, I want to save my people and me. I don't want to be killed. And there's a law in your land that says all of us are going to die. That all the Jews will be put to death on the 13th day of the 12th month. And he was so upset. And he said, "Who made this bad law?" And she pointed her finger at Haman. The wicked Haman, she said. He has made the law. And the king was so upset, he went out to walk in the garden. And while he was walking in the garden, Haman fell down before the queen to beg for mercy because he saw he might be killed. And when the king came back in, he saw Haman falling down across her couch. And he said, "Take him out and hang him on the scaffold he's built in his yard." They had told him that he had a scaffold very high built there. And they took Haman out and hung him on the scaffold that he had built for Mordecai. And that was the end of Haman, the wicked man. And Esther had saved her people. Now the king couldn't take back the law he had made because he signed it with his ring. And what did he do? He said, "Well, we'll let the Jews defend themselves. And when they go to war and the people come in to kill them, they can have protection, protect themselves and fight against these people." And God gave them the strength to fight that army that came in to kill them, and they won the battle, and they were the winners, and they got to live. And Esther had saved all of her people, the Jews, because she was brave and full of courage.
He comes.
Where's Mordecai?
Where's Mordecai? Is he coming out?
What about there? Where's Monica? No, this is me. This is Monica.
Here he comes. Come on, Mordecai. Mordecai. Where's the king?
Here comes the king.
Come on that side. Oh, is he over here? Bring him on this side. Ooh. That's perfect. Okay, that's good. That's good. Where's William's head?
I'll see it. I see the crowd. Oh, you're good at puppets.
Yeah, y'all did a great job.
Thank you for that puppet show.
That was perfect. Now take a bow.
Oh, yes. That was a good puppet show. Turn the bubbles around the other way so we can see the name.
Mr. Bubble.
Yeah, that's great.
The entire thing?
Yeah, keep going with it. Those things make a lot of bubbles. Joey's already getting bubbles over here.
Jesus' love is a bubbling, oh, Jesus' love bubbles in my soul. Jesus' love is a bubbling, oh, Jesus' love bubbles in my soul. Jesus' love is a bubbling, oh, Jesus' love bubbles in my soul. Jesus' love is a bubbling, oh, Jesus' love bubbles in my soul. Jesus' love is a bubbling, oh, Jesus' love bubbles in my soul. Jesus' love is a bubbling, oh, Jesus' love bubbles in my soul. Jesus' love is a bubbling, oh, Jesus' love bubbles in my soul. Jesus' love is a bubbling, oh, Jesus' love bubbles in my soul. ba-ba-ba-babbling, ba-ba-ba-babbling, ba-ba-ba-babbling.
Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above is looking down with love. So be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be ready? Are you ready, Dado?
Yeah.
Oh, be careful, little ears, what you hear. Oh, be careful, little ears, what you hear. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little ears, what you hear. Good job. Careful, little mouth, what you say. Oh, be careful, little mouth, what you say. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little mouth, what you say. Good.
Be careful, little hands, what you do.
Clap, clap, clap. Oh, be
Careful, little hands, what you do. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little hands, what you do. Be careful, little feet, where you go. Oh, be careful, little feet, where you go. For the Father up above is looking down in love. So be careful, little feet, where you go.
Everybody did so well. Woo.